So Bruce and Neil and I are going to report on behalf of the groups, and any filling in that needs to be done will be invited if those reports aren't comprehensive enough. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
All right, go for it.
Can you see me?
I'm getting there.
I don't know if
Yeah.
you can hear me on camera, so maybe I'll talk in front of the camera. Then you can just hear me. You want me to use the mic? Okay, I'll use the mic. All right. I'll try and get the high points here. There was a lot of stuff that came out of our group. So question one on the Integrated Oceans Advisory Committee. There were some suggestions, not so much about changing the list of responsibilities. I think people were at least generally comfortable with the responsibilities, but maybe about clarifying a few things. So clarifying about where recommendations out of this committee go, clarifying who writes the plan and what the process is for plan development, what are the steps, and how does the IOAC interact with the governance framework, etc. Clarify that the IOAC has the opportunity to comment on the entire integrated management plan package, not just individual recommendations, and clarify where implementation happens and how. Also clarify whether the planning office or IOAC members are responsible for disseminating information more publicly up to their broader constituencies, or maybe sort of refining what is the role of those two groups, the planning office and the IOAC, in getting information out. And then in terms of question 1B about proposed participation and balancing, there's a feeling that you certainly do want to keep it small. Somebody said around 25 people max, 15 perhaps a little bit closer to ideal. And clarify that it's not the only opportunity for participation. So there are also working groups, workshops, etc. So that's another way to bring input to the process. And that don't just consider the balance between individual sectors, but more broadly between commercial interests, recreational interests, and community interests. So how to make this group more effective? This, I think, is where we had a lot of conversations, so I'll just try and whip through some of the stuff. Need a sort of a rules of engagement, or perhaps something like a participation agreement that people agree to and sign on to in some way at the outset, so they have an effective and respectful means of working together. Potentially looking at some training or capacity building at the outset of this group to bring everyone on the same page in terms of how they're going to work together. Clarify how that group is going to be supported, that, in terms of how participants will be supported to participate. Allow for alternates. So allow for people who don't necessarily participate in the discussion to attend the meetings, be informed, and step in if someone is away, but also to allow for more than just say, if we're going to have a small group and only one person from a sector or an interest speaking, that there can be other people in the room from that same interest who can whisper in their ear, pass notes, and sit in the meeting and stay informed, while still keeping only a workable number who are actually speaking around the table. And one of our group members mentioned sort of the UN model as something we could look to for how this works. Also need to ensure that we're developing good networks within regions and interest groups to get that information out, to disseminate information, and establishing those points of contact in different communities that can act or work with the planning office to get information out to where it needs to go. So a little bit about working groups and topics there. There was a bit of discussion here about working groups versus the input of science and a sort of neutral third-party scientific input to this that would inform decisions. So not necessarily seeing those as totally different. You could think of your science group as a working group, but I think the key there, we agreed, was that you need them to be sort of credible by virtue of their objectiveness. Couple ideas for what some topics might be. A little bit more detailed work to refine the definition of ecosystem functions and services that inform the ecologically and biologically significant areas that have been identified. So thinking maybe that was a scientific piece of work that could be done. And also some examination of how do you account for trade-offs between choices in planning, and what is the mechanism that you use to identify and analyze those trade-offs. Perhaps doing some work to look into that. Also, a little bit about not using working groups to get too far away from the idea of integrated management, so not getting into a very sector-specific orientation, but using working groups to address specific topics that are specific but are also multi-sectoral, and that speak to that theme of integration. Working groups on economic opportunities, potentially breaking this down by different regions. And perhaps a working group to look at how do we link to other plans and processes. So, whether those be watershed plans or plans at more local levels. And from there, we sort of got into this idea of meetings and perhaps more local or regional forums, etc. So a couple ideas for workshops included using them to bring the early products out of a planning process out for broader public review. So if a working group has developed a set of recommendations that apply to the North Coast, use a workshop to present that and invite broader feedback. Also use workshops to potentially explore some of the different tools or strategies that can be used to advance integrated management, whether that be spatial planning or protected areas or some other kind of measure. So in terms of linking to existing processes, there's a suggestion to involve community outreach centers that can we could use as a local point of contact that can help us get information out, and also linking to sort of the smaller scale planning that may exist throughout PNCIMA, whether that be First Nations planning, the Waikanis National Marine Conservation Area, or perhaps more local efforts to do planning in the coastal zone or estuaries. And lastly, around using the internet, actually most of what we talked about was things we can do in addition to the internet, given that not everybody uses that as a source of information. So there's a feeling that blogs and social media and those sorts of things are not used so much in local communities as they are perhaps in more urban environments. We could look to other blogs that have been successful. Also a suggestion that we use the community access programs, program centers, is that right, James?
Yes.
So that exist in some communities, which can help people find and access information. So again, building some of those relationships. Community TV programs and sort of articles in papers, local radio were all other suggestions in terms of providing information to people and notifying them about what's happening. So that's what I've got as some of the highlights. Is there anything that my group wants to add?
Pretty comprehensive.
Okay, good.
Thanks, Neil. Bruce, you want to go next?
So I also have lots of comments. Had a very really interesting discussion in my group, so thanks everybody in my group there. So on the IOAC, in terms of responsibilities, there was an interest in including a dispute resolution process. So if, for example, there was some disagreement amongst individuals, that we sort of built into one of the roles there is how do we resolve disputes. And certainly a strong need and role for independent science, and sort of need to clarify the role